Rhizosorb is redefining what growers expect from phosphate fertilizer. Backed by data and built for performance, Rhizosorb helps reduce phosphorus losses, improve uptake, and boost ROI without increasing input costs. Join the next wave of growers switching to the next generation of phosphorus fertilizers by visiting phospholutions.com.
Welcome to The Truth About Ag. So instead of just doing the intro for this one, I thought we'd start a little bit different because obviously, Justine, you've been on before and we know your PR group is probably sitting in the background worried about what we're going to ask and then what's coming here, because every time they ask us for a list of questions and my answer is, we don't have one. So again, this is the Truth About Ag podcast distributed under the Real Ag Media Network and powered by the Heber Group of Companies. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. So today, for those that don't know who's on the screen with us today, we have Justine Hendricks, CEO, Chief Executive Officer of FCC, and Darren Baccus. What is your title? Give me your title.
Oh, I know. It's great. And Evan, Kristjan, thanks for having us. And our PR group is actually not worried about what you're going to ask us. They're worried about what we're going to say.
Exactly. Yeah.
So when you see us tackled off the screen, you guys can jump into your usual, well, let's talk about the Heber Group of Companies again. So my title is EVP Agri-Foods, Agribusiness, Alliances, and Farm Credit Canada Capital, which we have narrowed down to be AAFC3, which really, like, every time we say that, like, that's a horrible title.
That's why I didn't say it. That's why
I know it's a horrible. Because inevitably they then say, so what the heck do you do? And so the way that we describe it is, we've looked at how we face the market, and clearly you guys know this. The whole core of Farm Credit Canada's business is providing senior debt to farmers, to primary producers. So the 100,000 customers that we have that are, the day-to-day farmers, that's not under my mandate. What I cover is large corporate farms, call it agri-food, agribusiness, livestock financing, input financing, and then our new private capital group, which, Evan, you and I haven't had the chance to chat about, but Kristjan and I have had more than a few instances to talk about. So that's what I cover.
Okay, so I think we want to, at least I want to start, and then Kristjan's going to take over because I know he's excited to nail questions across at you. So I more or less want to know, where you got your starts and give me some of the background and education side, but also why you're into agriculture at all. I mean, I know some of your backgrounds, and obviously they're not directly linked with ag, but you're both here today. So give me, and I don't care who starts, give me your backgrounds and your story, let's say.
So let's let Darren start. He's got a good story.
Perfect. Oh, geez. Okay. So Winnipeg, born and bred, north end of Winnipeg. Dad grew up on a farm near Bruxelles, Manitoba. Went to law school in Manitoba. Couldn't get a job in Winnipeg, which is a whole different podcast. And ended up practicing law in 3 provinces and New York just as a generalist corporate lawyer. Did that for about 15 years. And then was like, I'm not sure being a lawyer is the thing for me, and shifted over to investing. So family moved to Edmonton from New York. That was a bit of a decompression, and moved into the institutional investing space. Did Edmonton for a while, came out here to Montreal and joined one of the federal pension plans. And that's, Evan, where sort of ag got its hooks into me. Because a role I took was running the natural resources group, which at this pension fund was aquaculture, agriculture, and timber. And from an institutional investment perspective, aquaculture, as I'm sure you guys and your listeners, is a very challenging space to think about from a scaling perspective, from an institutional investment perspective. And timber has really become, I think, institutionalized as an investment asset class, meaning large pools of capital are out there buying swaths of farm. And so where we really focused on was agriculture. And so this is going back about 10 years. And the focus was, well, how can institutional capital invest in agriculture? Which, is a thread that I'm sure we can now pull for a couple hours. But so spent a few years there, terrific group, where we deployed about $3.5 billion globally. So partnering with some ranchers down in Australia, partnering with farmers doing tree nuts in the Central Valley in California, partnering with some coffee farmers down in South America. And that's really what hooked me in, both from an institutional capital flow. So seeing the industry globally, understanding clearly the impact on people and all of us, but then also, wait a sec, the capital flow is not overly efficient. So after my institutional career, I actually put on baseball caps like you guys and raised a small fund with some partners down in the US doing regenerative agriculture investing. So we were kicking around the Mississippi Delta, Central Valley, again, never thought I'd have to put on a jacket again. And then Justine called. And she called, and this is after, and, Justine, you'll run through it, but if I sort of add a little piece, after Justine had done her diagnostic with the industry, right out there listening, hearing what the industry was asking for. And lo and behold, it was asking for different types of capital solutions, right? Knowing that Farm Credit Canada, we provide senior debt and we've been providing it for decades. What about providing other things? And she called up and said, hey, know that you have the ag bug, know that you're currently doing the ag thing down in the US on a very small scale, interested in coming back, joining Farm Credit Canada and driving the strategy forward. So it's been, Evan, it's been over a little over a year, has flown by. Man, it's been a ton of fun. And, I think our 2 a.m. fear is that the opportunity for the industry is just so massive. And we're so grateful to be able to push that forward. And we just don't want to mess it up.
I can live with the jacket, but the best part was he called it natural resources, and I know that's deep in your heart, Heaves. Do you want to comment before I go on to Justine?
I could throw a nugget out there just so we could discuss. Yeah, I mean, talk about it in Ottawa a fair bit, that the agriculture minister in my mind never really plays that big of a role within cabinet. I'm not saying it's a diminished role. I'm just saying it's never at the small table where you talk about lots, and kind of always thought that we probably need a senior minister of natural resources that has agriculture, has energy, and has critical minerals as the three units that really drive our whole GDP. And then possibly more junior ministers underneath it that focus on the 20% that those three industries disagree on, right? Yeah. There's 80% when it comes to infrastructure, export, all that type of stuff that somehow they got to get on the same page to actually get anything done instead of just talking about it.
More or less to get us a seat at the big boy table is kind of the light terminology, let's put it.
Yeah.
Okay, Justine, give us yours. And I mean, this one's different. I'm excited for this one.
Oh, really? Okay. So, and I guess I asked Darren to go first. So, born in Ottawa, I know Kristjan and Evan's favorite cities in Canada. After 2 months, moved to Montreal. So I grew up in Montreal, essentially. My connection to ag, I would say, starts where in my family, my mom was actually part of the first classes of registered dietitians in Canada, because that's a fairly new profession across the country. So I'd like to think I grew up with food and having a good understanding, not only of where it comes from, but, the role that it plays in all of our lives. And then, just as I was finishing high school, my mom got this great opportunity to run actually the National Institute of Nutrition. So she's coming back to Ottawa and basically says, hey, why don't you come? So I came along, went to university in Ottawa. My dream was to be an architect. So go figure that one out. But at the time, I didn't get into architecture school, which, is, something that I still regret to this day. But I always loved the creativity bug. So I finished like an urban studies degree. Then I went to work at the bank for about 10 years. And then an opportunity came up with Export Development Canada. And funny enough, when a former colleague of RBC called me, I had to look EDC up because I didn't even know what they did or how they existed. So I go to this, I'm like, apply at 11 o'clock at night when the deadline to apply is midnight. I'm like, okay, I'll figure this out. I go in, I get called in for an interview, and I still remember to this day, they asked me whether or not I had ever let go of somebody. And lo and behold, I don't think I ever told you guys this, but that afternoon, I was letting somebody go. So I said, well, actually, after I've done this interview, I got to go back to work, and this is something I got to get done. And before I even got back to the branch, I had the job offer, and then I kind of panicked. I'm like, whoa, okay. So I had my career kind of progressing at RBC. Then I'm like, okay, I'm going to this Crown Corporation. What do they do? But what really attracted me, and in the meantime, I had done my MBA, was this whole focus on national, right? I really like the ability to say, hey, some of the things that I can do will have an impact on Canada as a whole. And that attracted me. So I went over to EDC, 17 years at EDC, and I literally went around, did some financing, created products, all of the good stuff. And I guess, which is an interesting kind of turn of events, I ended up, similar to Darren, responsible for the resources sector, which at the time included forestry, fisheries, and ag equipment. It didn't include everything else. So I spent many days in Winnipeg in the dead of winter. And, Darren was, enjoying himself elsewhere. I was at minus 45. And one of the first deals when I was on the financing team that I brought at EDC was a greenhouse deal and an ag equipment deal, and Farm Credit was looking to be involved in it. So, and that goes back, like I said, 10 plus years ago. So went through that, and then I got a call about 3 years ago about this opportunity for FCC. And then, I applied, and I look back at the experience I had, understanding the customer, loving the sector, loving what can we do to make Canada a better place and kind of elevate it to make sure it can knock it out of the park. So I said, okay, I'll go and I'll give it a shot. And I got the job. So, and, I don't know if I've ever shared this with you guys, but when I finished one of my first, trips with EDC in the ag equipment space, and it was going to this big show in Russia, I told a staff member that was beside me, as we were waiting to go, I turned to him and I said, I actually think I have the best job at EDC, because this is the coolest sector in the world. I love the people that are part of this sector. I really think it's kind of close to where things happen. And then, when I ended up getting this job, that same staff member sent me a note. And he said, Justine, sorry to see you go. Congratulations, all that good stuff. But he said, I don't know if you remember that you told me that. And then he says, look at you, full circle. Now you can go kind of head the industry. So, sometimes it's maybe be careful what you say or what you wish for. But yeah, that's how I came into this amazing job. And along with Darren, we're super excited about, being that catalyst or that enabler in the market. And to your point, Kristjan, we thinking it 50 years ahead is where we've got to go. And, we're hoping that we can play a big part in it.
Evan, did I ever tell you my first test for Justine? Nope. She comes out to the farmer and Todd, and we meet my office first. It's middle of harvest or start of harvest. First time I ever met, just trying to meet farmers, right? So we talk business and numbers all at the start, but going way back in history, our farm has really only ever had one big load for FCC, and it was back, I can't even remember the year Dad had it. And there was a commodity-based loan back in the day, which was a bad idea by farmers and FCC at the time, because really it just mimicked the interest rates, but then interest rates went to 18% because commodity prices went up, and so it didn't go very good. Yeah, and so I was like, oh. So when we're done in the office, I was like, you better come out to the field. And she wanted to, and I threw her right in Louis' combine. I'm like, we're going to find out how good at sales she is. And I thought it would take an hour, and here 2 hours later, Todd's texting the next office, FCC office they're supposed to get to. It's like, we are not going to be on time.
Oh, that was great. He was great.
That's good. Yeah, threw to the wolves on the first day. I like.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Whatever Kristjan tells me today, it ain't going to be the same tomorrow. So just be on your toes.
Okay, Heaves, what do you got for questions? I'm going to let you start.
Well, I think we should start one of the main reasons we want to have both you on is I think I'd like to hear more detail on the $2 billion announcement, right? So I think most farms have seen the ads and the print on it. But Darren, I mean, I've, like you said, we've had a few coffees, so I've heard a little more about it. Like from both of you, it just maybe round out the timeline, what you hope to do with the investment, and kind of exactly what the announcement really means to agriculture. Because I actually don't think most primary producers understand how big that announcement is and kind of what you hope to accomplish with it.
So Darren, do you want me to start with the strategy and then, because that's a big component of it? Right. Because, so for the audience, 2.5 years ago, we went across Canada, talked to tons of stakeholders, kind of came out with this strategy, and the tagline is ag and food needs all of us, right? And within that, we identified key areas where we wanted to dive in more to be able to drive innovation, better productivity, overall success of the industry. So, and before I turn it over to you, Darren, with that detail, but when people ask me, okay, Justine, kind of what's the summary of the strategy? There's 3 words to summarize it, right? Being bold, being a catalyst, and building for resilience. So the boldness is, we got to keep on doing what we've always done super well, as you've said, Kristjan. But as the industry changes, whether you need new products, new services, all that good stuff, FCC's got to be bold and actually do the first step, right? And it might be a step that we haven't done before in the past or look really different. The catalyst part is about how can we either bring the industry together, bring investors together, the bankers together. So because we know that the ambition is huge, and we can't do it alone, thus ag and food needs all of us, how do we bring those folks to the table, co-create, collaborate, and then deliver? And then everything we do is to build for the long term, which is building for resilience. And then within that, I then turn it over to Darren, and that's where that investment part kicks in. And that's just a component, as you mentioned, Kristjan.
Before Darren talks, I gotta say, I love this. This early in the morning, she is shot out of a cannon, and this is great. So
the best part, Evan, you'll love this. Like as she's using the words of like, oh, these are turning into questions. The PR team is like, oh dear God.
Go ahead, Darren.
But isn't it great? Like Justine and I have it won't surprise you, have had these conversations before, and that scaffolding that she built, right, is so both consistent and what we heard from the industry, right? Like that's what's so cool is as Justine talked about we talked about my joining FCC, and she sort of put the scaffolding up. I was like, interesting, but did a bunch of people and consultants sit in a back room and put that together. So I went out to my network out in the industry in Canada and heard back from the industry, yeah, no, this is what we need today, right? This is what we need. It's like, geez, like, okay, so this makes sense. It's not FCC saying this. It's what the industry told us to build. So take that scaffolding. If I sort of punch in on the 3rd floor, right, it's the capital solutions, right, which is in its simplest form, we provided senior debt for decades, incredibly important part of the industry. But, think about it as your own personal finances. You don't just need a mortgage for your house, right? You need a savings account. You might need a credit card. You might need a payday loan, whatever it could be. And so we looked and we said, okay, we need to provide other capital solutions for the industry because they've asked for that. And so we've been exploring how we can provide different types of capital solutions, but in looking at capital solutions, one thing also became apparent, which is the whole industry is, of course, anchored on primary production, right? And look, this $2 billion, I said this to you, Kristjan, when we grabbed coffee, this $2 billion is not taking a single dollar away from our support of primary production.
Right.
So I want to be super clear on that. That's our core business, and that support is still there and will always be there. But what we saw was, and heard from the industry was, look, they're not making any more farmland. Maybe we can reclaim and make, but they're not making any more farmland. And Canada, like we have the tools to be the global powerhouse in food and ag. We got primary production. We got access to 2, if you go up to Churchill, 3 ports, ample fresh water and the like. And not to say it's not without challenges, as the two of you know, but if we look and we say, okay, all the tools are there. Well, what's one of the headwinds we have? And we look at the headwinds, and it is increasing productivity. Right? How do we increase productivity? And then when you dig into that, something you realize is that we as a country, we really have an innovation deficit. What I mean by that is, we've got this primary production, right? And we've got this great industry and people that are just committed and blood, sweat, and tears of driving this. But call it the ecosystem, call it corporate research and development, just hasn't been putting the money in at the same scale as other countries, right? So, the US, which only produces twice as much as the world's food as we do, like only 2 times, they spend 6 times what we do on research and development. So guess which way you're on the escalator going the wrong way then, as far as bringing innovation, which really means driving productivity on the farm. And so once that became apparent, right, how do we bring innovation to the industry to drive efficiencies? It really was, okay, like we need to be catalytic capital. And so, as I shared with Kristjan and Evan, super excited, right? We went and we looked and we said, okay, this $2 billion number, again, not something we went in a back room and just pulled out. It was a number that when we looked at FCC's balance sheet and we looked at the industry, we said, this is the right number deployed over the next 3 to 4 years that we believe will be catalyzed and pull innovation to the industry, pull innovation to primary production. And so if I drill down a little bit more, right, it's like, what's that $2 billion going to do?
Let's pause the truth about ag to go into financial acumen. We are facing high cost of production, volatile markets. Come work with Maverick Ag. Why would you come work with Maverick Ag, Gibbs?
I'm a big believer in doing what you're good at. And so if you don't want to spend time in the details specifically of your financial management and financial acumen, then you're better off to partner with somebody. Run your farm, grow your crop, raise your animals, whatever your specialty is, and have a high level knowledge of the financial side. But let somebody work with you to get into the details and let you know when debt service is getting close to offside, what your cash flow is doing, and what months you're going to be tight so that you can run the farm the way you want to be, as perfect as possible.
Do you want someone to help you deal with the banking regime or look at your next equipment deal? Reach out to Maverick Ag. That's maverickag.com.
So it is focused on, number one, FCC now doing direct investing transactions. So it is us actually going and acquiring equity in companies that are driving innovation in the industry. And people ask, well, why do you want to be on the cap table? Why do you want to directly own part of that company? Is because we want to be a voice at the table of that company, right? We want to be able to sit there and explain and have the voice of the primary producer come to that company, because I think we've all seen super cool ag tech companies in Silicon Valley or Waterloo that really, like, if they ended up at Kristjan's office, like, they would not manage as well as Justine did. They'd be facing the wrong way on the combine. And it's not their fault, right? It's just like getting innovation onto the acre. You can't just sit back and say, hey, company, here's $100. Maybe you'll find your way onto Kristjan's farm. No, so that's point one. So half that $1 billion is going to be us directly investing and having influence and governance to get those innovative companies, bring the innovation onto the farm. The second piece, as this is what Justine said, right? That scaffolding, we can't do it alone, right? Like Farm Credit Canada, 3,000 people, 106 offices now, but we can't do it alone. So that other piece is investing in funds. So call it investing in investment groups that themselves are focused on driving innovation and productivity in the industry. So it's just a force multiplier. But here we can then look on specific strategies, right? We may look and find a group that is only thinking about water and looking at innovation in water. And there we can deploy capital there, partner with them, and drive them towards, again, bringing that innovation into Canada. Because you've heard me say this before, Justine said it. The second step of not doing this ourselves is crowding in capital.
Yep.
And what we know, and in fact, we sat down with the minister and had a great conversation about this with capital partners, where they all said, when an investor is looking to come into food and ag, especially if they haven't done a lot of food and ag before, they want to partner with somebody that knows food and ag, right? Like it's kind of an obvious statement to make, but if you look back even 5 or 6 years, if somebody wanted to invest in food and ag, unless it's like you guys in the industry, it's kind of hard to find opportunities. And Kristjan and I talked about this. It's sort of like real estate 35 years ago, right? Like you say today, if the four of us said we want to go buy an apartment building in, outside of Regina, we know there's brokers that sell them. We know pricing on the market. We could go to 6 banks and get financing because they understand it. That's not food and ag today. If the four of us said, hey, we want to go get a piece of, I don't know, a maple syrup farm outside of Quebec City, there's not an obvious broker, right? There's not, banking stuff. That's what we're trying to create. So crowding in that capital and institutionalizing it, all to drive that innovation down to primary production. So, Kristjan, if I come back, right? So $2 billion, split it up between direct investing and these investment groups that we're going to support, deploy it over the next 3 to 4 years. We're going to do it across life cycles. So from startups all the way through to companies that just need that extra oomph from a growth perspective. Right? We're going to do it across our mandate, which is enhancing food and ag. So again, we'll look through the chain, and we're going to crowd in capital. And you'll notice I keep saying we will, because like we're going to do this, right? We heard from the industry the opportunities are here, and even Justine, I'm trying to remember, we announced it 7 weeks ago, I think, 7 or 8 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Geez, you should see our FCC Invest general email box. We've got 2 people that are just like cranking for that bad boy.
Yeah.
People reaching out.
On LinkedIn, like the number of requests we've received in LinkedIn. So, and I know, Kristjan and Evan probably want to get back in here, but maybe just, like one data point, right, Darren? So $2 billion in 3 years from this perspective is massive from a Canadian marketplace. And don't quote me on the right number or not, but isn't it that back in 2023, what was the amount of investments in ag? Was it in ag tech in Canada? It was like 275 million. So let's take that proportionately, right? In terms of what it represents, and maybe just share like how much have we deployed since the team got started in the last year and a half?
Yeah. So in the last year and a half, the team's deployed just under 200 million, which again is in a handful of direct deals and fund deals.
Yeah.
But also what was great about that was those were our proof of concept deals.
Yeah.
Right. Both internal and external. Internally focused because these are new things for FCC. And again, you guys know this. You don't just go 100 miles an hour as soon as you jump in. Right. So it was like, let's break a few pipes. Let's see how this works because before we roll it out. And then externally focused was awesome because every single transaction we did was partnering with a significant investor, some who had done food and ag before and some who were just coming into food and ag. And that's really that last one. That's really that cool part, right? These are investors whose investable universe, like the buffet of where they can put money, it's pretty wide, right? They could go do livestock in Australia. They came into Canada. They came into Canada because partnering with us, we helped explain the opportunity. We helped show the underwrite. We helped show how we're going to asset manage to drive value, introduce them to people like Kristjan. They still did the deal. And so it
You didn't talk about that, Darren. That part you had left out when you first.
Sorry, we don't introduce Kristjan until after the deal's done, right?
That's what we talked about. Yeah.
The interesting part of this is, and Heaves, you and I have had this discussion a million times, even through the cultivator and through all the other investments we've looked at, is that I'd never thought about the fact of having an ag mind actually directing some of the actual motion of the actual investment. Because we've always said that most of the investments we see come across our desk for agriculture, you're right. It's Silicon Valley. They've never talked to a farmer. They've never asked a farmer of what they actually want. It seems like a simple question as I say it, but 90% of what we see never gets that step involved.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Evan, can I tell a quick story?
Yeah.
And Justine's heard this story. And so we're looking at partnering with a large institutional Canadian investor, and they've dabbled in food and ag, I would say, but they have conviction now in food and ag, and they were looking at an opportunity, and we've been talking, and they asked me one question, and it was a very it was an on the dirt question, and said, "Wait, I'm not the person, but we're Farm Credit Canada." So I fired off a note to a couple people, in corporate commercial, found somebody, brought the fellow on the call the next day. So these investors, God love them, right? But they haven't. Again, throw them on Kristjan's farm. They couldn't tell the combine from the F-150, right? But that's okay. And they throw up this spreadsheet, and the guy from FCC goes, "Man, that's wrong. That's like 10 times inflated, and that's not the right words for what they're talking about." And again, this Bay Street group was like, "Holy."
Say it.
They quickly ran. Yeah, so they run the number. It's pretty easy, right? So you punch in these numbers, which this guy said, look down below, and it took the return from like a 22 down to like a 6. And they're like, well, that's interesting. And again, the Farm Credit Canada fellow is super humble. He's like, look, that's just my perspective. Open parenthetical. He's been in the freaking industry for 25 years. Like, it's not a perspective, it's a fact. Yeah. This group, close the story out. The group goes away. They called us back. They said, yep. So we went to the partner that was proposing it. We just highlighted these. They backed off immediately. They said, oh, well, sorry, didn't realize you were going to dig into the numbers. But that group, Evan, is now, they're sending everything to us. And they're saying, what can we do? And they're super excited about food and ag, because the flip side is this fellow also said, well, hey, here's a few things I would look at. Right, here's some opportunities I would look at. So you're absolutely right. For investors that don't have that food and ag lens to be able to call and get access. I mean, I joke about Kristjan, but we have talked about, even like who should talk to Kristjan? How can we bring not just people to FCC, but people to industry expertise and experience to have the conversations? Because this is how other industries became mature in bringing in capital. You can't expect capital to have that expertise. But as an industry, if we sit there and go, God, they didn't know an F-150 from a combine, I don't want to do anything with them, we're not going to get that capital flow that we need. So it's on both of us. And look, we're pretty excited that we think we can be in between, translating maybe, but just putting them together, standing back and just watching the magic happen.
Go ahead, Hebes.
Yeah, I mean, I got a similar story, right? We had a bunch of execs out from, I don't know, 5 or 6 of the biggest companies in Canada on the regenerative policies. And I kind of purposely took them to my heavy disc instead of my zero-till air seeder, and only one knew the difference.
Yeah.
One, right? So regenerative, one of the number one practice changes is zero-till. Like the great-grandfathers of zero-till are 30 miles from our farm, the Seedmaster brothers, right? So I mean, there's an argument whether they were first or second. We've been running zero-till since the late 80s.
Yeah.
But I agree. It's two things. One, I think agriculture has just kind of stayed under the radar, that people cared about it, but didn't really care, or at least capital didn't care. Right. And two, sometimes as farmers, because someone doesn't understand right away, we maybe dismiss and don't have the discussion, right? Where to me, it was a pretty easy discussion. You kind of set it up on purpose to be like you do realize if I took that heavy disc out to all my acres, you guys would never fund anything. But you didn't know that was the difference between what you would never fund and what you would fund, right? So we both need to learn a little bit here. And I think, but I mean, I can say too, from consulting in San Francisco to meeting with execs, there's a whole bunch of stuff in their life that I was pretty dumb about, right? Like you get talking to EDC. I remember the first time I was in a huge meeting with EDC and some CEOs, and their idea of a small project was $250 million. It's like, I still remember the guy looked at me and says, Kristjan, you're not thinking big enough. Yeah. I was talking like a $50 million pilot project. And he's like, Kristjan, you're not thinking big enough. In order to do that, I have to get the ag minister and FCC involved because I can't go that low. And I'm like, what are you talking about? But it's, as primary producers, we when we start taking on debt, the first million or the first 10 million, right? For us to think that there's organizations out there that to come into agriculture need it to be in kind of minimum 50, but more like 100 to $250 million bite sizes. that's hard for us to think about. But that's the food industry. There might not be a lot of farms in that number, but there's getting to be farms there. And like you said, Darren, there's, I would kind of argue right from that 50 million when we kind of got to use the swear word of bank syndication, up to these $250 million plus deals. Primary producers have no idea how to navigate that, nor do I would say small food processors and value add companies, because they've always just dealt with agriculture debt the exact same way you deal with a house mortgage, right? There's FCC and 3 or 4 big banks, and I go talk to them all, and hopefully one will give it to me. Like that's how it goes. It's not like I have a plan. I need $50 million. I know one of these two will give it to me because I've got it's that whole learning on both sides that I think is super important, right?
And Kristjan, maybe on that, so I think you're touching on a couple of things that are super important. So for one, the fact that it's tough to navigate, I think it's important for the audience to say is, this isn't just an ag and food reality, right? Having been at EDC 17 years, the entrepreneurs of Canada, right, as you grow in size, face the same thing. And I think part of our job is to help them navigate that, right? And so Darren talks about the in-house expertise on the sector so we can crowd in some capital. But I think for us, right, and you guys do a great job at this too, right? There's some advisory components to it. How do you navigate that system? Who else? I used to say at EDC, like the who's in the zoo. We take it for granted, right, Darren? Like, cause we're in it every day. But for the entrepreneur, the farmer that's out there, we know what they care about. They want to grow the best crop, do the best job they can, and time is of essence. So I think that's where we need to step in. And part of the strategy too was about this recognition of what I call the Canadian ecosystem. And you guys have heard me say this before. I always say, hey, whatever research is going on in BC, Charlottetown has no idea about it. And I actually think from a Canadian point of view, we got to change that. Because when you look at other countries that are competitive and kind of on it and really, really hitting strides, they're kind of a one team, right? They're the Team Canada opportunity. And that's what I think too we need to do, so that we can be more that one voice. It's scary when Kristjan starts to have a smirk, right, Evan?
Well, you said Team Canada, and come on.
I heard a good story the other day of the company that came in to do the planning for Calgary Stampede.
Okay.
And I forget the name of it, but they had 5 really good questions. It was like, where are we going to be in 50 years?
Yeah.
Right. What's still going to be here? Because they're doing infrastructure planning, but really you could do it on industry. What's still going to be here? What might or might not be here? So if we get our new, rink, what can we get rid of? Right. What do we need to build around it? But then the 5th one, I think, is your key Team Canada one. That's why I was smirking. So what's the magic wand? So what's the policy or regulation we need to get rid of because it's holding it back? And I was like, I wonder if Justine will jump from EDC to FCC to maybe a high role prime minister. Someone that understands agriculture. Anyway, sorry. We're leading up topic for another day.
Wow, that happened quick.
Yeah, Kristjan can run the campaign. Evan, you better be on top of the numbers, and we'll send Darren for the
coffee.
I did pull a question I do want you two to discuss though, is, as everybody knows, in the last 3 years, like, Canada's productivity has been a huge topic of conversation to the point because it's decreased fairly significantly, right? And I think, personally, I think agriculture, primary production, and FCC can play a huge role in the increase in that, because there's a couple things. I think when you invest in investors, that's the best way to get productivity versus really large companies. They can just grow faster, so it makes the dollar do more. But two, I think it takes 2 things, right? It's this catalyst of capital that you talked about, Darren, and it's also, and Evan, we need to take some of this responsibility too, is understanding and teaching the industry about kind of de-risking this utilization of innovation. Because I think there's a lot of innovation in agriculture, but I think there's some nervousness to take it on, because it's your own money. Like, I don't get to invest somebody else's money if I want to put a bunch of new innovation on my air seed or in my office. It's my check.
Yeah.
And if I'm wrong, it's my kids that lose money on it, not anybody else, right? And And that's the joy of being an entrepreneur. It's why we love it. But it adds a little, I'll call it, let's just say it adds a little pressure to the risk, right?
Gonna pull you away from the podcast here to go into Farmer Coach. We have opened up the registration for November. Brand new courses, the executive, the foundations. Heebs, why would you come to Farmer Coach?
Yeah, I think 2 quick points. The first one is just a baseline knowledge around farm management, right? From accrual statements and debt service ratios to human resource policies that we've seen work on operations and businesses kind of around the world. And secondly is just knowledgeable peers. It's not just what you learn, from the coach and being in the program. It's what you learn discussing with 10, 15, 20, 25 other operations and what's worked and not worked on their operations. And I think those 2 pieces are pretty invaluable.
With more than 90 producers having gone through the course, you have an online platform. It is probably one of your largest peer groups you can be a part of. So sign up, go to farmercoach.ca, and we'll see you in November.
So you want me to, okay, so I'll kick it off and then Darren will make it pretty. So a couple of things on that, Kristjan, and we're getting close to releasing like a thought paper that will speak to this. And in it, we talk about a direct link on that dollar you invest in innovation, how it can directly increase productivity. Darren probably knows the stat better than I do, but yeah, so it is very much a close-knit relationship. And if you overlay that with the fact that we've decreased the dollars and the investments in innovation, well, it's not a surprise that our productivity is declining. So I'll try to be a bit bold and say one thing and then complement it with something else, which is I think we have the industry and Canada's got to be super proud of what we bring to the table. But when we have those conversations, and I know you guys are a good catalyst of that, is to recognize that what's brought us to success today, and if we did exactly the same thing, it's not going to get us to where we need to go. And that's the part of the conversation, if I'm honest with you guys, is the tough part, because you're almost scared to say that because, you don't want to offend, you don't want to insult or anything, but it is kind of the truth that we've got to look at. And what you hope out of that is you rally people to say, okay, like, what are we going to do about it? And, you were at our Future of Food conference, right? And you were great to say, hey, can we stop talking and getting shit done is kind of what you said. I quote Kristjan, but yeah, like we got to move to getting stuff done. Right. So I think that's really the opportunity. It's pretty clear from my humble opinion, this drop in productivity, you can slice it any way you want. It's huge. Right. And if you look at the opportunity of what we can go get, there's no way you can even tackle that without improving your productivity. So what choice do we make? Do we choose to embrace the opportunity or do we dwell in like, hey, we haven't had this, we haven't had that. And I'm not suggesting at all that there aren't, regulatory, all of that good stuff has to be dealt with. But what we're trying to do is to really focus on the opportunity side. And those that want to come to the table, back to us recognizing that we can't solve it all on our own, but we know we can play a big part, I think is where we want to play. So that link to productivity is there. And then, from an FCC point of view, we've been looking at it too, saying, well, why would a customer or prospect say, should I work with FCC or not? Right. So we know, like, I think it's the ag production customer, right, Darren, that works with FCC. We've got data that shows that they'll be 7% more productive as a result of working with FCC than if they don't. On the agribusiness side of things, I think it's 18% or something, right? So that's a huge, boast of confidence for us, but it's a motivation to say, hey, kind of come in so we can do more. But Mr. Baccus, I know you have lots to say about this.
And if they wear an FCC hat, another 100 basis point increase in productivity. Like, shock me too.
Yeah.
It's funny that neither of you are wearing a hat then. You should list growth.
Yeah. We're overdressed.
Look, let me take it down to the entrepreneur in the soil, right? Like Kristjan, what you were describing, and a couple thoughts on that front. Right? So, driving productivity, bringing innovation into food and ag, and in particular primary production, has those unique, call it challenges, that the investment community needs to understand. And I contrast it with prop tech, right? bringing innovation into buildings, InsurTech, bringing it into, like, a key one is you screw up a growing season, you screwed up the whole season, as opposed to all those other ones where, okay, next quarter, Kristjan, let's reset and drive on. And so that de-risking of adoption, and look, we need adoption. There's no question. And we also know that we're in this really unique period of, you know, people recognizing that food and ag, and Canadian food and ag in particular, has real capital needs and is an investable space. And capital that needs to, as I said, many of them have a buffet where they can choose. That buffet is getting smaller. So as an example, 25 years ago, large pools of capital invested in apartment buildings on mainland China. That's not an asset class where people go today. So you got capital looking for places to deploy, and you got an industry looking for capital needs, and us connecting that. So how do we do that? So Kristjan, something, you know, number one is we know primary producers are entrepreneurs. Like, at their core, you guys are running a business. And also, what are you you're risk managers. Like, that's what every primary producer is. They're managing risk. And so what FCC can do is, as we invest, catalyze, bring out those innovations, it's, can we bring them further to reduce the risk when it actually gets onto your farm? So part of that is our innovation farm network, right? So 16,000 acres, that's across six separate farms in 4 provinces, where we are actively putting innovation early onto those acres. Because you know what? If it screws up, okay. And you know what? We learn a ton. So that when we get on to our customers in the industry's farm, you see what happens. Like, we've already, and it's not to say there's not going to be risk, but again, the other thing is our ability to then bring metrics and data to you guys, right? So Evan, you can say, okay, so you want me to do this kind of precision ag. You know, if it messes up my whole, like, yes, okay. We have data that it's been on a few thousand acres. Look at it. How does this relate to how you farm and whatnot? So you can do what you do better than we do, which is risk manage your own operations. And then I can tell you one thing that's awesome about this industry is primary producers are looking for opportunities to drive productivity, right? To make more money, to make their operations more productive. And so, again, you know, I've thrown out a lot there, but if you simplify it down to our ability to put capital to drive innovation and investments, to bring them further along, so that, and to bring the data so that before it goes on the acres, it's been de-risked to a point where the real risk managers, the primary producers, can look and say, okay, I will take this risk or I won't. And that's how we're going to get that productivity, Kristjan. And it's going to be, again, the entrepreneurs, the risk managers, the on the soil that are going to take that innovation. And then, again, I'm telling you what you guys know to close with this thought, right? Once it starts to go, people are looking like, hey, Kristjan, what did you do last season over there? You know, hey, Evan, I drove past. I noticed you got some drones flying around or whatever it might be. Like, how'd that work out? And then that's wildfire, right? Then that picks up.
Yeah. And I think what we're finding is the generation switchover is actually increasing adoption. So we've always, I mean, Hebes and I have said it a million times, the most dangerous phrase was we'd always done it that way. And that was what a full 3 generations stuck to, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even GPS took us 11 years to get a 50% adoption rate. And I mean, that's a number of farms, but it's still a terrible number when it comes to tech adoption. But I think the biggest thing I've seen lately is that changing of the guard to the next generation that grew up with cell phones. They never had a time where they had to use a dial-up, which I did, which is scary at this point. But it's that changeover that I think is actually going to speed up adoption going forward. And back to your question, Hebes, of what's the next 50 look like? I mean, that to me is more exciting than the past 50, to be fair.
Totally.
And I think there's a few pieces to it, right? Right, is that, I mean, if I look, one of the things that opened my mind to ag tech even more is, so I did some consulting for Granular out of the San Fran, which was in the climate boom, right? Sold for like 300 million and now it barely exists. But I went down there when they were getting going, and same thing. I went down to a bunch of tech people in downtown San Francisco thinking, what can they teach me about farming? And left 2 days later, and then ended up doing it every 3 times a year, as exhausted as I've ever been. Because what excited me is that this was smart people that cared about agriculture. right? It wasn't, when I first went, it's all a bunch of tech degrees at MIT and Harvard.
Hey, Kristjan, we're still here. Just the air. We're still listening. Okay.
Yeah. You notice that I kind of gave you a left hook, but then came back with the smart person. So yeah. But that's the part that gets exciting, right? Is I always like smart people in capital can fix almost any problem on earth, but they usually are looking at a different way to fix it, right? And everyone asks when we get harassed or asked, we used to get harassed. Now we get asked a lot about 24-hour seeding. And I don't even know how many years we've been doing it. I think 2009 we started. But one of the key reasons we did it was, one, education. I was down at TPAP, and two, when I went to Granular, they had a second team, and I think it was Romania, that's the exact opposite time zone as San Francisco. So they could go 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, 12-hour shifts. And they did a handoff call every morning at 7 a.m. And they just they never quit. And I'm like, oh, that's actually a really good idea. I think, Evan, part of it is the changing of the guard. Part of it's no different than us going to TEEP. So, I mean, I took TPAP down at Texas A&M. So we've sent Evan and Jeff. We're going to send more people. But it's really the fundamental reason on why we started Farmer Coach and why FCC has a education arm too, is that we can't get so busy that all we do is grow crops every day, right? If you're the CEO of your farm, there's an education portion to ensure that you don't do it the same way year after year after year. And an easy way to do that is put yourself in a room with a whole bunch of people that are smarter than you, right? It's one of the my favorite places to be on earth, is that just a place where you can just listen and learn and add little bits and pieces to conversations, because there's really no new ideas anymore. There's 10% that you steal from 10 people and put together, right? But you have to get around those 10 people.
But you know what you're saying though, Kristjan, which I think is a really good point. So we all want to grow this productivity. We know there's an opportunity out there, right? So what you're talking about with folks coming to your course is, we kind of know the problem we need to solve, but the root cause of the problem is something else, right? So you've got a passion for growing and being a farmer, but you got to be aware of what's going on around you. Because if you want to make those smart decisions, you got to talk to other folks. So how do you choose how you allocate your time, right? And I know you're pretty passionate about, like, if you have an opportunity to invest in a good person in your team, you'll opt for that anytime and you'll make time for them, right? So I think it's the same mindset we need to bring to the table. The other one is, when, Evan, you're talking about the next gen, we got to make it easier for the next gen to be able to take over, right? And it's another example where, right, Darren, like we've been hearing that, everybody talks about it. And yeah, guess what? About a month ago, we came out with a new transition loan, because the context of the market's changed. We all know the prices are going through the roof, and the structures that once were don't work anymore. So, right, how does an FCC go back to the drawing board, blank piece of paper, kind of take in what's going on and try to come up? And it's not the most perfect solution, but hey, we went to an AM of 10 years, we can fund the down payment 100%. Like, there's all sorts of features. And as it's rolling out in the field, we're getting positive reviews on it. But my point being, we can talk about that. How do you increase productivity? But you got to go around it and it's like kind of enable, right? And I think some of the stuff we're partnering on is that enablement piece. And that's what's going to get people to say, like, oh, okay, I get it. I can give it a try, or, redirect a little bit how you spend your time. And I think that's why collectively, that's where we got to focus, right? And be there to support.
Well, one's enablement, right? Which is usually education, capital, right? Learning environments. The other one is, as an industry, we need to be a little careful of anchor bias. And I remember I wrote a blog that Old McDonald had went bankrupt, and I got lit up industry-wise about it. And the whole thing was really what we talked about, was that the next 50 years can't be the same as the last 50.
It's true. Yeah.
And so how are we going to do it different? And everybody automatically assumed that I just thought every farm was going to be 1 million acres. So, and I took quite a few phone calls on it. And the first question I'd ask, so when they'd start lighting me up, that I think farms are going to continue to consolidate. If you look at all the other industries, and there'll also be some farms that have great little niches, because it's really tied to revenue. I think revenue needs to consolidate, not necessarily acres. So find a way to get to 1 million, and then 10 million, and then 20 million in revenue, and for a whole bunch of obvious reasons. But what I'd say to them back, most of them were grain farmers that would phone me. I'm like, oh, so you're still seeding with a donkey and a plow, right? And well, no, of course I'm not. I'm like, oh, so you agree with me then? Like your great grandpa used a donkey and a plow, right? And then went to a plow horse and then went to a tractor with a little cultivator and then and now they're running a 60 or 80 foot drill with full GPS that they barely just keep the seat switch activated. It almost turns itself around at the end of the field. Yeah. Well, so then you agree with me, but we can't do it the same way, except what I'm saying is we can't just look at the soil part.
Yeah.
Because we're actually pretty good as farmers at seeing that, oh God, we got this new drone. We fly the fields with drones and use AI to help with rock picking. And all my farm buddies think it's the greatest thing ever because they can see how that's going to make life easier. But there's so many pieces to our businesses to make life easier, right? Where capital can really help, whether that be on something as easily as an HR training program, right? One of the best things we've probably ever done in the last 24 months is our SOPs are now YouTube codes to a private YouTube channel, right? You get in the piece of equipment, you take a picture of the Q code and it takes you to a video of how to run the fuel truck. Because everyone kept beating our heads that we needed SOPs. And every time we wrote them down, there was a good piece of paper that just bounced around the cab or sat in the binder. Well, the YouTube codes in a private YouTube channel is one of the best training things we've ever done on our farm.
Yep.
It can't just be what's the soil, right? It's training people, it's education, it's how do you deal with your risk management. There's so many facets to the job now.
Well, and no different than talking the private equity side with Darren. It's how do we bring that, and we talked about the next gen and everything else. And I've dealt with a lot of professors in some of the colleges around Canada right now. And that's what they're saying is textbooks don't work anymore.
No.
You don't learn from textbooks. You learn from 30-second TikTok clips. So if we want our students to actually listen to what we're saying and learn, we can't do it the old way. And I think whether it's education, whether it's ag, we're all come to the same conclusion is that things got to change and we got to figure out how to be the catalyst to actually force that change.
Can I, Evans, just one last thought, which I'm going to steal a line from somebody down south in the industry, but next 50 years, right, Kristjan, you described that?
Yep.
Hopefully it is, I want to get this right, where he said, excitably, awesomely boring for our industry. Because at its core, it's like driving productivity, driving innovation, but de-risking, reducing volatility, because we know this is an industry that is so important, not just for Canada, but for the globe. And when I heard that, I was like, yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. This isn't hair on fire. Oh my God, this is so cool, right? Like blockchain. We want to get de-risked. We want this to be boring. We want institutional capital to understand and be driving this, but it's still, excitably awesome.
Yeah.
So we're at 55 minutes and I don't know your guys' timeline. Obviously Heaves isn't combining yet, so he's got all the time in the world. So I want to be conscious of your guys' time, but Heaves, why don't you give us some finalized questions, just whether you want to shoot them off quick and we'll get some quick answers, just so we don't take too much of the time.
Yeah, no, I think we'll just go down that thread that Darren started, right? So it's around the question of where do we want, I don't even say where do we think, right? Where do we want Canadian agriculture, Team Canada, just for you, Justine, to be in 50 years? And obviously for you two, what are the key points that you're focusing within your roles at FCC today to get us there, right? And then Evan, give your thoughts on it too.
Yeah, I like it.
Darren?
We go in reverse order?
Of course. Let's get it up.
There we go. So quick answers. So in reverse order, it is, I spend a lot of my time focused on, as Evan, you described that, the connectivity between the industry and capital and getting smart people in the room that just want to learn from each other. And, what's super interesting, and Kristjan, if I sort of generalize what your experience was, it is probably the right, it's delightful. It's amazing. It's to see a primary producer or agri-food entrepreneur in the room with capital. And, initially, she walked in and was like, I'm not sure I belong. And the next thing you know, it's 2-hour conversation and she's teaching. And she walked out and I'm thinking of a quick story. She said like, wow, those smart people really didn't know much about the industry. So that's what I and the creative team is spending, because there's on both sides, the desire is there. It's just like there's that bridge and translation there. And then Canadian food and ag in 50 years, it's the powerhouse. Like, honestly, it is so obvious, but it's going to be so hard for all of us to get it there. But that's where it will be.
Okay, so I'll pick up from there and I'll say two things. One, which you guys have all heard me talk about, is, right, Canada's generational opportunity, right? So I think we got to remember we can solve these four major global problems. So for me, in order to solve those problems, it's probably going to take us 50 years, right? So health, hunger, climate, and economic growth is critical. And Canada is so well positioned. The sector itself can solve all four at the same time. And I will say, find me a sector that can do the same thing. So the opportunity in front of us, I think, is very clear. Where I spend my time right now, and, I see it a bit, kind of a summary of what we've been talking about, having the right conversations. What I've come to realize, when you actually engage with people, investors, bankers, you name it, it's not that they don't care about ag or they don't know that it's important. They do. But in their list of top 10 priorities, it's always number 7. And what happens when you're in 7th position is that when you get to the midpoint of the year and you got some tough choices to make, am I going to get everything that I wanted to this year or not? 7's probably the one. 7, 8, 9, 10, you drop. So it's, and so for me, where I'm spending my time, I want us to take the conversations and move the sector in stakeholders' mind from 7th place to 5th and then 5th to 3rd. And I think that's how we're going to get it. Right. So I'm learning every day, but I have to admit, I don't think people don't care. They don't know. They know. They just don't know how. And if we can go at it that way, like even the 4 of us, and we've all had examples, that's what's going to take us to that next 50 years.
Hebes, I think for me, and I'll piggyback off Darren's comment, I want the industry to be boring, and not boring in terms of the growth, not boring in terms of the dollar values, and then just the excitement around ag tech and everything else, but boring in terms of, I don't want to call on a Monday that a producer is worried he can't pay his bills because he hasn't got a rain in 3 weeks. And then on a Friday, he gets 2 inches and all of a sudden life's fixed. And I want the professional side and the business side of ag to come out and be more of a front runner than it is right now. Cause I feel no different than what Darren had mentioned. We have the volatility, the risk management, like there's so many complex decisions these guys are making. And I just don't think as an industry, we're prepared for that. So for me, 50 years from now, I just want everybody to have that preparation in place and that planning in place so that agriculture is, to be fair, boring. What I'm doing today for it, I think the deals we have in place on the consulting side, the farmer coach side, I mean, the service lines, we're built for that. And that's not by accident. I mean, we did it on purpose. We said this 5 years ago when we started, is we know there's a hole when it comes to the business side of ag. And we know that if tough times or a down cycle comes, that's going to be a massive hole on an industry that already has a lot of volatility. So for me, that's what we're trying to do. Is, don't get me wrong, we're a business, we want to make money, but at the same time, I don't want the phone calls from a stressed out producer every single week.
Yeah, I could go on about this one for a long time, but I'll start with producers because that's where Evan just finished, right? Is it, I believe that there's a large number of producers in Canada that are very good and are only, call it 1, 2, 3 things away from being great. And it's actually not their fault. It's that the education and the people you can talk to, and even peer groups that you're comfortable to phone and ask these questions of, is kind of low in the industry. And what we find lots of times in Farmer Coach Ev, right, is that the first thing they do is actually just hire one more person, because they start to realize that their number one asset is time. And without time, you can't get any better. And it's not your fault. You're just so busy, because if you, like you said, Darren, you have one growing season. So if you don't grow that crop, harvest that crop and sell that crop, you don't get to farm again.
Yeah.
So there's no time to work on the other stuff, right? So when it comes to producers, it's just helping them, enable them on HR, start with that one person. Magically, when they free up time, guess what they do? They become better capital managers and better risk managers. And when we get to the point that the industry understands that growing the crop you can have team members do it as good as you. It's hard for us to believe as farmers, but you can. And that your three most important jobs is people, time, capital, right? And those three things are what allow your operation to go. And I think that's what really lets the primary production catapult in the next 50 years. For the industry itself, I think what we've talked about here, I mean, it's the sharing of knowledge between pools of capital, executive level people, and primary producers. So I mean, and if I look, Evan, at some of our speaking, right, I've completely trended to executives and pools of capital. I'm going to go do one in the middle of harvest for kind of the top 20 CEOs of fertilizer companies in the world. And 50 years ago, I don't think a farmer would have got invited into that room. And now, like, to me, that's exciting because these people are managing billions and billions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of people, and they understand business really well. And the exciting part is they are very interested to better understand primary production, right? That the final customer of theirs is the farmer. It's not the retail, it's the farmer, and they want to better understand. And I believe it's because they want to help, right? And cool things happen when the first thing that come to people's mind is how can I help? Yeah. Instead of pointing a finger to blame, right? If you walk in, whether that be with an employee or to a meeting or anything, and if in the back of your head, it's just how can I help? And if we can get our whole industry, right, from politics to executives to primary producers with that, how can I help? Then I think that the powerhouse dream is 100% attainable.
I like it. So, any last comments, Darren or Justine, just to finish up before we sign off?
Darren?
I love how she just throws it to you. I know. So two things. Thanks, guys. Like, love the conversation, and if we can support in any way, and also feedback that you hear, like, we're keen to take that. And Evan, I think this boring thing, I think it might have legs.
So Kristjan and I think are more on the exciting part, and you guys are on the boring side. Maybe that's why we make a good yin and yang thing going. So, hey, I just want to echo, guys, like, thank you. And you've always been great supporter. And, for one, looking to understand what we were trying to achieve. And frankly, you've helped us spread that word. And to Darren's point, right, is there any feedback for the audience, for the industry? Yeah, like, we're open for business. And just remember, what we've done for 65 years is not going away. And everything we're doing around that is to take it, to the next 50 years. So just thanks for allowing us to have a cool chat, during Kristjan's vacation.
So yeah, I want to follow up with just, I appreciate you guys coming on. Obviously for us to have the executive of FCC sitting on a call with us, I didn't think was possible when we started talking like this, Hebes, but lo and behold, your network and the rooms you get me in front of some really cool people. So I appreciate both of you being on today. And remember to like, share, comment, subscribe. And as Justine said, leave comments. FCC is open for business. That's the tagline. So that is The Truth About Ag. Thanks for joining us. The Truth About Ag podcast is a proud member of the Heber Group, which includes Heber Grain Ventures, Maverick Ag, and Farmer Coach. We appreciate the support. Lastly, please like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring the bell. And if you have questions for a future podcast, please leave in the comments below. Thanks for listening.